Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the game of the century between Bobby Fischer and Donald Bryne. And this one was really a magical game. Loads and loads of brilliant moves. And yeah, just watch it for yourself. So, this game started with knight to f3. And one thing I noticed analyzing a lot of Bobby Fischer's game recently, he had a lot of brilliant games that started with the Reti defense from the black side. So he was truly a master of these sort of Grunfeld and these Queen's Indians positions. So anyway, knight to f3, knight to f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop g7, d4, castle, and bishop to f4. One thing to note, and I always say this, if you play the Grunfeld, you better know the King's Indian defense as well, because if white went for e4, you would have had to transpose into a King's Indian defense like this. But Donald chose to go bishop to f4, allowing Bobby to play d5 and the Grunfeld defense. So we see queen to b3, and always if your opponent puts a queen to b3 in the Grunfeld, the move is always taking on c4, from my experience with the Grunfelds. So queen takes c4, and now pawn to c6. This is a modern theory. You want to go bishop to e6 without allowing pawn to d5. That's why you play pawn to c6. But okay, e4, and now Bobby played knight to d7. And things are looking pretty normal, pretty standard, but let me tell you, in a few moves, the brilliant move is about to come. Rook to d1, knight to b6, and here Donald decided to play queen to c5. By the way, Donald Bryne is also a very, very strong chess player. This is no weak park putzer. These are two very strong players playing against each other, and that's what made the game so great. So queen to c5, I mean, another option was queen to b3, but I guess Donald didn't want to be, so passive and allow all of this stuff to happen. So he chose to play queen to c5. And now comes bishop to g4. Developing the bishop finally. Logical move. Donald played bishop to g5, which breaks an opening principle, the one that says you should never move your piece twice in the opening. So a better move would have been simply bishop to e2 to try and castle and protect this knight at the same time. But bishop g5 was played, and now comes the first brilliant move. I will encourage you guys to pause the video in this very moment if you would like to find the brilliant move yourself, and I'll give you a few seconds to do that. But here is the brilliant move. Knight to a4. Now what? This move comes out of nowhere. What the heck? How can you just sacrifice a knight like this? Well, firstly, if this knight gets taken, now comes knight takes e4 with an attack on the queen and an attack on the bishop. And where can this queen even move? The engine suggests queen to b4, but now simply you take this bishop, and after all these exchanges, black finds himself in a much better position and white has a very weak king. One variation that is quite funny, if you try to block this line with bishop d3, bishop f6 is a double attack, and you will end up losing one of the pieces. So all the way back here, Donald saw this, and he did not take the knight. Instead he played queen to a3. But now comes knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight takes e4. Now knight takes e4 does look like a blunder because of this move, bishop takes e7. But Bobby Fischer considered all this. He's fine giving up the exchange, because he has very active pieces. And here he played queen to b6. Now Donald finally decided to start developing bishop to c4, but it is time for brilliant move number 2 of this game. These moves are like proper brilliance, not the brilliance chess.com gives today for sacrificing a piece. These will make you like rethink how you look at a chessboard when you see these brilliant moves. Knight takes c3 is the move that Bobby Fischer played. What? Is this not just a free knight? Well, if this knight is taken, now Bobby will simply move his rook to e8 and pin this guy. And the computer recommends the move castle and take on e7, and you have a game. But of course black is going to be better, a pawn up and the bishop pair. So this knight cannot be taken. By the way, if you try to come back and defend your bishop, for example like this, now you can just play the move queen to c7, or even fancier queen to d8, and yeah, there's no new way to defend this bishop. This bishop is just gonna be lost next move. So that's why Donald decided to play bishop to c5. He's moving his bishop out the way, and now once you move your queen, this knight is free. So you have to move your rook first, of course. Give a check. King goes to f1, and now in this position I would highly encourage you to pause the video, because this move has been called the move of the century, the move that Bobby Fischer played in this position. So I would really encourage you guys to pause the video and try find it. And I'm just gonna tell it to you. The move, bishop e6, sacrificing a queen. So in the game the queen got taken, and we will see that variation shortly. But a beautiful variation to look at. What if this bishop gets taken? Now will come the move queen to b5 check. The light squared bishop no longer guards this diagonal. The king goes to g1, and now comes a crazy smothered checkmates. Knight g3 double check from both of these guys. If the king goes here, this is just checkmate. So king here, and look at this. White is surrounded by all these pieces, but the king has no breathing room, and that is a checkmate. So the bishop cannot be taken. In the game, the queen got taken, but it's a similar idea with bishop takes c4. The king only has one square, king to g1, and now comes knight to e2 check. And watch how this knight windmills everything. King f1, knight takes d4, giving a check again. The king is forced to go back here. Knight goes to e2, king to f1. Now the knight goes to c3, king goes back to g1. And now Bobby just collected this bishop on b6. White is 1 point of material up, but it doesn't really matter because this queen is attacked and this rook is attacked. There's not really a good way to defend both, because if you try to defend like this, there's a fork. So queen to b4 was played. Now this knight is protected by the bishop, don't forget about that. So the move rook to a4 attacks the queen, defends the bishop at the same time. Queen takes b6, and now Fischer was free to pick up this rook. And here the game is already over. I will, like, in modern day chess, a grandmaster would resign in this position, but Donald kept playing, and we're glad he did, because there's a very flashy checkmate coming. Pawn to h3. He wants to get his rook out by bringing his king up. Rook takes a2, king to h2, knight takes f2, and watch how the pieces just collapse. Rook to e1, the rook is exchanged, and in this position Bobby has a rook, 2 bishops, and 3 extra pawns for the queen, which is gonna be more than enough to win. But the way he did it was very precise. Bishop to d5, putting pressure and protecting himself. Very solid. Knight f3, knight to e4, queen to b8, and now he takes a step out of his attack and plays pawn to b5. You know, very calm. White actually has no way to attack. This bishop defends all the key points. So we have h4. By the way, this is not winning a queen. Bishop d6, check. You might think it's winning a queen, but the bishop is pinned, so it cannot move right now. So that's why we see king to g7, getting himself out the pin. So that next move he can go bishop to d6. Now comes king to g1, bishop c5 check, king to f1, and this king was just hunted down. Bobby Fischer delivered a forced checkmate in 6, starting with knight to g3. The rook is covering this whole second rank. The bishop is covering here. The king is forced to go to e1. Now came bishop b5 check. The king is forced to go to d1. Bishop b3 check. The king is forced to go to c1. And all these forcing moves eventually led to this checkmate. And wow, game of the century. Remember, if you enjoyed this analysis, like and subscribe for more.